Well, great. I don't think Susie needs a huge amount of introduction, but I have got some words to read out. Susie's best known for being the queen of Dictionary Corner, the resident lexicographer and etymologist of Britain's beloved TV show Countdown. For nearly 30 years. Before she became a media personality, Susie graduated from Oxford with a modern languages degree and worked for Oxford University Press producing dictionaries. She's always been fascinated by quirky words and regularly shares her love and knowledge of them on TV and radio shows and writes articles for The Independent, The Telegraph and The Times. She's also the host of a podcast series and author of several books, including Susie Dent's Weird Words, Dent's Modern Tribes, and most recently, Word Perfect. Susie, welcome to the EA Festival.
Thank you.
We're delighted to have you here.
Thank you very much.
You've somehow managed to make lexicography cool.
Have I? That's nice to know. Yeah, I mean, even the word lexicographer is quite hard to say, isn't it?
Yeah, I had to practice it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's just, the best gig in the world, I have to say. It's the best job in the world, but it comes with this vocabulary that is incredibly opaque. So I would love to kind of open it up a little bit and just, inspire future lexicographers, because reading dictionaries, I promise, it's just a laugh and it's a ball, and we have the best discussions in our little dictionary corners.
Great.
Yeah.
Do you have contemporaries abroad? Is there a celebrity lexicographer in France or Finland, or the only one?
First of all, I hate the word celebrity, so hopefully I'm not one of those. I think I like to fly below the radar wherever possible, which is probably why I'm a lexicographer. But, well, there is, Countdown came from Les Chiffres et les Lettres, which is a French, well, it was the original Countdown. And there is a professor sitting where I am, who's much sterner than I am, and I'm not sure he has quite as much fun. I don't know what goes on behind the scenes in that. So, but I mean, there are so many people doing what I do. I was just in the right place, genuinely in the right place at the right time. Famously didn't want to go on Countdown because, well, not famously in my family anyway, because I really didn't want to be on TV. And said no quite a few times, and then was persuaded by my boss. So it was a very sideways move. It wasn't something I set out to do.
Ah, that's fascinating. I'm going to ask you about Word Perfect,
yes.
your latest book.
Which was very much word imperfect for anyone who read the papers at the time.
It was published during lockdown?
Yes. Shall I just open the back? So it was published during lockdown, and I received my advance copy on the day of publication. Opened it. If there are any authors here, you will know just how terrifying that moment is. Opened it, and the first thing I saw was, I think it was a repetition of the word "the."
Yeah.
And I just thought, I'm sure I got rid of that. And the more I looked at things that I know were corrected at proof stage, the more I realised what I was looking at was actually an early proof version that was then printed.
Really?
And you couldn't have asked for anything worse for a book that was called Word Perfect.
Is that? It's in there. They're all in there, are they?
Is that the original?
I think so. Yeah.
Where did you get that from?
Well, it's.
I thought we pulped all of them.
Oh, well, I don't know. Maybe that's.
Is it your imperfect copy, Joanne? So. Anyway, yes, it was not a great day. I hid under the duvet for a little while, but my publishers were brilliant. We called everything, and the papers had a field day. But actually, most of them were very kind, because I think any editor knows that there, but for the grace of God, go they. So, it was all okay in the end.
Good.
Yeah, but not a great moment for me.
And you've got you mentioned our East Anglian princess, St Audrey.
Yes.
Etheldreda.
Yes.
Yeah, as being the origin for the word tawdry. What's the story there?
So that's a really nice one. It's quite a sad story, but this is in the 7th century, and the daughter of the King Anna at the time was sent Etheldreda. She fled a very unhappy marriage and founded an abbey in Ely, which then became, in fact, the city's cathedral on the same place. And she died of a tumour of the throat. And she saw that as retribution for vanity in her youth, where she'd worn very beautiful necklaces. Popularly, she became known as St Audrey. She was the patron saint of Ely, and there would be fairs held in her honour. And at these fairs, they would sell little strips of lace that people would wear around the throat, and they became known as St. Audrey lace. But in the manner of these things, they became quite cheap and cheerful. They were sold off quite cheaply. And so they were seen as being quite shoddy, which is where we get tawdry from St. Audrey. So it's a very strange twist.
It's a very sad story for
Very
poor
sad.
old
Yeah.
St. Audrey.
Yeah.
And in Word Perfect, you have a word for every day of the year.
Yes.
And I think today's word is petrichor.
Oh, yes.
Yes. What is petrichor?
Petrichor it's gained quite a lot of traction on social media recently, because I think it really filled a gap in the language. So petrichor, we've had quite recently, it's that smell of rain. So it's either the smell of impending rain, or it's the smell that is exuded from the earth after a period of hot, dry weather, and the rain hits it, and you can smell. It's actually from a compound called jasmine, and it was coined by some geologists in the 60s, and it's a beautiful word, because petri comes from the Greek for stone, which is why when we're petrified, it's almost like we turn to stone in fear. And ichor was the ethereal liquid that was said to flow through the blood of the gods. So it's really quite a sort of divine word. But we all know that smell, don't we? And it's just lovely that there's a word for it.
Luckily, we haven't had smelt it so far today, but hopefully. But it is a lovely smell.
It is beautiful.
I was fascinated to learn about ablaut reduplication.
Oh, yes.
Reduplication.
Yeah, this is what I mean, you see.
I just really was. I didn't know about it.
Who's going to go around talking about ablaut reduplication?
Exactly. Where else do you get it? Can you explain
what it is? So, you would never wear a pair of flop flips, or hear bells go dong ding, or eat a cat kit, or dally dilly on your way. You get the idea.
Yeah.
And we have lots of these, what are called rhyming duplications or duplicative compounds in English. And this is one of the kind of ancient rules, if you like, or ancient laws of English that we don't know we know. As native speakers, we're really, really lucky that we don't have to learn this. And it's all to do with sound. And for us, centuries and centuries ago, ding dong obviously sounded better than dong ding, and it's all about which sounds come first. So that naturally when we coin new words, whether it's zigzag, as I say, shilly shally, etc., we will never place it the other way. We just know innately and instinctively that's the way to do it. And there are lots of invisible, I say laws. English doesn't really have laws because we don't have a government or academy laying down what we should do. But there's another one which dictates word order, which I often talk about because.
Well, that's my next question.
Oh, there you go. Okay.
Yeah, no,
sorry, I'm
that's
jumping
great.
ahead.
So we're on in. I didn't know about this. I presume you're talking about adjective order.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't know about it, and during lockdown, I was teaching my kids. I did some home educating, and.
Yeah.
And adjective order seems like something that I should teach them, and I Googled it and I did it. And one of them wrote down a lovely, wide, ancient, curvy, brown Egyptian wooden writing desk.
Wow, that's
which
quite something.
Is opinion, size, age, shape, colour, origin, and then material, and then purpose.
Yeah.
I mean, where does that come
there
from?
You go. Do we ever learn that?
No,
Absolutely not.
No.
But again, there's something, and I don't know if it was actually ever set down. It is just something that we have, wisdom that we have accumulated over the years. So you will never have a green jolly giant or red new shoes. You always have new red shoes, and we just know that, and we're so lucky that we don't have to deal with that kind of gnarly complexity. Whereas people who are learning our language somehow have to master all of this.
Yeah,
that's tough. It's tough for them.
Yeah, but you don't. There's no explanation for that order you've ever come across?
Not particularly. I don't think anybody sort of set down this is exactly what happens. But this is the way, amazingly, it's evolved so that we can extricate or extract rules from them. Yeah.
It is fascinating.
It is.
In your previous book, Modern Tribes,
Yeah.
you got inside all sorts of clubs and cliques. How did you identify these groups, and how did you discover them?
Well, I think I was one of. I mean, we all are. I think we're all members of particular tribes, if you like. So if you're a bird watcher, if you're a tennis player, if you're a paramedic, your passion or your profession will give you a lexicon, which you don't often realise that you have. It's just when there are outsiders who are not really understanding what you're saying that you appreciate the fact that, oh yeah, I didn't really think about that. So I went to a convent, for example, and if we got an H3 at confession, that was 3 Hail Marys. Well, we had lots of far ruder ones, I have to say, at my convent. But then I became a cyclist. I love cycling, and I learned all about bonking, which for any cyclist, it means something very different to the normal thing. That's hitting the wall when you totally run out of energy. So we're all members of these tribes, and I've always been an eavesdropper, always. I've always loved, I think to be a linguist, you have to really kind of tune into what people are saying, and I usually just have a little book or now my phone, I just will type things in. So I went around collecting things, and then I also was really lucky that I got to go out with some paramedics and got to go out with some bird watchers, I mentioned those, some cabbies, lots and lots of different people, Freemasons, lots of professions and groups, and just tuned into their lexicon. And I know that I only scratched the surface because, every single group will have their own shorthand. But it's such an important shorthand. It's banter, it's unifying, it's solidarity in language.
Yeah, it's just fascinating. You found lots of regional words for... One of the ones that interested me was silly. I think loony and batchy are our East Anglian words for silly. Can you recall any other good East Anglian words?
Well, I like, this is not exclusively East Anglian, but I like sort of giddy. I was just kind of always called giddy when I was little, and that's got quite an interesting etymology because it originally meant possessed by a god. So it was actually sort of the idea of sort of being goddy, that you were somehow taken over by... a sort of demon, if you like, and that you can find running through, particularly through Roman history in language, words like ventriloquist, because that comes from ventri, stomach, and loqui, to speak. So the idea was that it was a demon speaking from your stomach, so not somebody who had a puppet in the hand. Right,
extraordinary. You also recently edited, I've got it here, Brewer's Dictionary of Phrase and Fable.
Yes.
Which is...
a tome.
Yeah, it is no small book. This is Brewer's. So, apart from just how do you get the time to do a book this big?
Well, I just absolutely will put my hand up and say there's a brilliant team working on this. So
right.
I was not, on it every day. I wish I had been, but there's... That book goes back so many editions and so many generations. It'd be totally wrong to say, actually, that's mine. It's really not.
Right. You must have a lot of dusty old reference books.
Yes, although fewer than you would think,
really?
Actually. Yeah. I have, some of them are very old, and I used to collect mini dictionaries, like little tiny little English and bilingual dictionaries. But my absolute Bible is the Oxford English Dictionary, which I don't know if anyone has one here, but that's 20 volumes. And I no longer have my version because it was falling apart. Well, I do have it, it's in the loft, but I no longer have it sort of, on display because I use the online version, which is there every single day on my screen and is constantly being updated. And it's the most wonderful book.
So how does a new word find its way into the Oxford English Dictionary?
Well, the Oxford English Dictionary is it's a historical dictionary, so it's like the mother of all dictionaries, I suppose, in that it will tell you the very first meaning of silly, for example, which actually was blessed and happy,
right.
And it will trace the journey of each particular word. So it will show you in the case of silly that it meant then innocent, and then humble. And then because we are very judgmental in the way that we approach these things, if someone was humble, it was thought that they probably didn't have much education and then not much intelligence. And so you can trace it through the centuries, which is amazing. Once a word gets in the Oxford English Dictionary, it never comes out. So it takes a while for the editors to study a word's journey and then say, okay, it's got enough longevity and it's being cited in enough records for it to go in. The current English dictionaries, it's the one I use on Countdown, the Oxford Dictionary, words go in and out, mostly in actually, because it's online and its space is infinite. So they have quarterly updates. The criteria really have to be that it's used by enough sources over a certain period of time and to show, quite often if there are riffs on it, you can see that it's being picked up. So to take a rather horrible example, chav, which burst onto the scene in 2004, that very quickly began to have spin-offs like chavtastic, chavvy, etc. And you could tell then that it somehow lodged itself in the consciousness. That, incidentally, you're going to regret having asked me this on Christmas, but that actually was a Romany word, and a very innocent one from the 19th century, where it meant a mate or a child also. So it was a very benevolent word, and then it was picked up and completely twisted, but it flew below the radar for over a century.
Do you know if it originated in Chippenham or anywhere particular?
Chatham in Kent is where people
Okay.
think it came from, and lots of backronyms were invented to account for it, like council house and violent and various horrible things. But in fact we think it's a Romany word.
I want to move to some questions on the future of English.
Yes.
It's okay.
Yes.
First of all, full stops. What's going on?
Yes.
I didn't know. There's obviously something going on.
Yes, well, I can tell the story of this. So
Yeah.
I was asked by, I think it was the Sunday Times a while ago, to write an article on the future of the full stop, because they picked up on millennials, such a maligned kind of generation, aren't they? We blame everything on the millennials. But apparently they were saying, the full stop is actually quite aggressive. And exactly. And I thought, okay, this is ridiculous. But do you know what? I then started to investigate it. And what they were talking about was purely certain contexts. And so to give you an example, if I was to say to you, I got a new job yesterday, you could reply, that's great, with an exclamation mark, right? Full of exuberance. That's the one you probably want. That's great, without any punctuation, is kind of quite quick and you think the conversation is going to develop. That's great, full stop, is entirely different. You know, that's great is sort of resentful somehow. That's great.
Sort of kills it, doesn't it? Yeah.
So I totally saw what they meant in certain contexts. And so I wrote an article about this, and then it was picked up at another literary festival. I was at the Hay Festival, and I was talking to Stephen Fry. And I said exactly that. I said, I can see how, in certain contexts, because of the way that online language is moving, it might actually indicate something you don't want to. And then I was the new woke lefty liberal, according to the Telegraph the next day, by saying that full stops were on their way out, which is not what I was saying at all. And to be fair to the Telegraph, they gave me the right of reply, so I did explain where I was coming from. But the changes in punctuation and grammar are really interesting, I think. And I don't think we should be scared of them. A lot of people will tell you that English is going to the dogs, that actually, we are not using language properly, that online language is somehow becoming or encouraging this bland, monolithic language that is intended for everybody and losing its nuance. And actually so much research has shown that it's the opposite, that actually on the online opportunities are actually expanding our language, and local dialects are emerging on the internet, which we wouldn't have had before. And we know that semicolons, much to my regret, are disappearing. I love the semicolon.
I love semicolons, yeah.
But, now they're being replaced by dashes or full stops or whatever. But again, This is only in certain contexts, so I think we shouldn't worry too much.
We mustn't be worried.
Not too much.
But what about emojis? Do we need to worry about emojis? Or what do you think they're the beginning of an enormous change, emojis, or do you think they'll settle down where they are?
Well, I don't know if you remember, John, or if anyone remembers that. I think it was, actually I can't remember what year it was, probably about 6 or 7 years ago, Oxford University Press chose as their word of the year the crying with laughter emoji. Again, much consternation. This is terrible, Oxford, the biggest authority on language, is choosing an emoji as their word of the year. And in their defence, this was the linguistic element that had spiked most clearly on their graphs, because what we do as lexicographers is we chart the ebbs and flows of language, so we can see scholarly journals, newspapers, text conversations, spoken conversation that's been transcribed, so many different sources, and you can see which words are bubbling under and which words are really exploding through the surface. And that emoji was one of them. And we've always had pictorial representations of language. We had, obviously, the hieroglyphs. You've had lots and lots of different pictorial languages. So to dismiss them, I think, is actually not entirely justified or fair. And I think they do add nuance again in the new media. I'm not suggesting you use them willy-nilly, but they do add a certain kind of subtlety which sometimes you need. That's a great example. If you put in a little smiley emoji, that would be fine. But I remember at the beginning, Rachel Riley used to send me messages which were packed full of emojis, which always made me laugh. I thought, no, I'm just not going to go there. And I don't quite use as many as Rachel, but I do use them now. Yeah. Especially to kids, Do
you think they'll find their way into literature? Is there any example of finding their way into print yet?
Yeah, I'm sure there are. But they won't replace words.
No.
No, I honestly don't think they will. You ask about the future of English, and I think most lexicographers will tell you, don't be scared of language change. It's always happened. I always say, in Shakespeare's time, his critics thought he was coining words like laughable when actually it should be laugh-atable, and this was a terrible, linguistic crime that he was committing. Verbing was another thing that he did. Keats was also criticised for verbing language and talking about turtles passioning their voices, and people thought this was just, awful. So we've always worried about us kind of degrading language or not treating it with respect. But the one area that I think for me is worrying is vocabulary, and there's been a lot of research recently by Oxford University Press and other publishers showing that the gap between kids who have a good vocabulary and those who don't is actually getting wider and wider, and that's something to be fearful of, I think, and something we need to do something about.
Yeah. That brings me to some of my next questions, actually.
Okay.
About losing words. Mentioned in Word Perfect, you mentioned furky toodling, bell guarding,
yes.
hench and smicker. Did words like this ever come back? Or once they're gone, do they just end up being a footnote in the Oxford English Dictionary?
Well, language is incredibly circular, I think. Some are really constant. So if you take the adjective cool, we think that started with 19th century public school slang, that something was cool in that it was, hot, or it's an approving word, a word of approval. Then it kind of came to its heyday during the jazz era, and we still use it now. And actually, even adults can say it's cool without sounding ridiculous to their kids. So that kind of thing, you can see it's gone like that. Others, I feel like I'm on a mission to try and revive, and they do kind of take off. I think thanks to new media, well, not so new now, but words can be across the world in a fraction of the time that it took, even 20 years ago. So words like apricity, which I always try and bring in whenever I can, which is the warmth of the sun on a winter's day, which I think is beautiful. Confelicity, which is joy in someone else's happiness. I'm always trying to bring those ones back. But quite often, even in their day, they were quite rare. So both of those words only have one record in the dictionary. So there's a chance, but we just need to use them.
That does bring me to my next question as well.
I should say what furky toodling is, though.
Oh, yes. What is furky toodling?
Furky toodling is Victorian slang for a bit of kissing and cuddling. And, yes. Furky toodling.
Why are there so many words for kissing and cuddling and alcohol and sex and booze and drugs seem to sort of have vast numbers of words.
They do. At some point, Joanne, you ought to have Jonathan Green at one of your festivals, who is the Mr. Slang, really. He's the leading slang lexicographer in the UK. He's an absolutely phenomenal man, and he's written the OED of slang. And he will always tell you that the waterfront of slang is very narrow but incredibly deep. So its themes are quite few. There are only a few certain themes. I say a few. We're talking in comparison with everyday language. But as you say, the reservoir is absolutely vast for those subjects, and it's because slang loves anarchy. It's a rebellion, so it chooses the words that we might want to tiptoe around, that we might want to be euphemistic about, and quite often they turn out to be quite funny, so they become a sort of banter. But it's all about rebelling against authority, and as soon as the authorities or those who are supposed to be kept outside scale the wall, it moves on. So it's a really fast-moving area of language.
That's why there are so many then.
That's why there's so many. I mean,
Yeah.
words for being drunk are evolving all the time. There are literally
Thousands?
hundreds. Yeah,
Yeah.
well, probably
Yeah.
thousands. Yeah.
Yeah.
Going back there, booze, for example, is 16th century Dutch. So, I mean, they go
Right.
back quite a long way.
Right. Orphaned negatives, interestingly.
Oh, yes.
Came across them. Couth and gruntled,
Yes.
nice words,
Yes.
have vanished. But
Yes.
they're negative. Why do the bad ones stay
I
on?
know. I think that has something to do with the British psyche, really.
Yeah.
Well, I think we're a pessimistic lot, really.
Right.
So we tend to dwell, I mean, rather like slang, on the kind of sad and bad and seamy side of life. And yeah, so if you were to choose the negative version of something, you can be disgruntled, you can be uncouth, you can be unkempt, you can be unruly, you can be unwieldy, you can be impecunious, and so on and so on. You can be dismayed. In the past, you could be made, wieldy, pecunious. P.G. Woodhouse gave us gruntled. You can still be couthy in Scotland. You can be full of gorm as well as gormless, because that comes from a Viking word meaning to take heed. So all of these existed in the past, but we thought, no, we're not having those. So we will just chuck away the positives, and we've kept with the negatives, which I think is sad. So yeah, bring back the orphaned negatives.
Bring back the orphan negatives,
Yes.
exiled siblings.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. And the same thing slightly goes on just with words for ugly and
Yeah,
pretty.
yeah.
We've got millions of words for
Hundreds of
ugly and
words for
very
ugly.
few nice words. I mean, how big is the imbalance between
Oh,
what you
it's
think of
huge.
as nice words and nasty words?
It's huge. I mean,
is
we're
it-
doing a little bit better with things like fit and dench, and you mentioned hench and that kind of thing. But generally, we love a good moan, and that's where dialect comes in. So local dialect, really important. There's a big fear that local dialect is slipping away, and certainly there are lost vocabularies to do with, you know, ploughing, coal mining, professions that are not flourishing at the moment, where the vocabulary was really strong, and that is disappearing, and that's to be lamented, I think. But when you look at the sort of earthy, everyday vocabulary, I think it's a bit like a baggy jumper. When we go home, we put it on, it feels really comfortable, we talk to our family and our friends in the language of our region and our family. We make up sayings. We've all got family sayings that mean nothing to other people. I think one of the big elements about dialect is that we like to moan and we like to criticise. And you can imagine, you know, sort of people just sitting around going, ooh, look at her kind of thing. And I think possibly because it's very much an oral tradition, that sort of pessimism kind of comes through. We're gossipy. There's hundreds of words in local dialect for gossiping as well. So I think rather than saying, oh, that, you know, they're very beautiful, I think we tend to say, oh, I don't like that or whatever. And I'm not articulating this particularly well, but I think that's it. We like a good moan. It's the same with the orphan negatives. We dwell on the negative.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, the most
Which is sad.
The lalacasia.
Oh, lalacasia, yes.
Lalacasia.
Yes.
Is extraordinary.
Yes.
And what is it exactly?
Lalacasia is relief of frustration or stress or pain through swearing, essentially. Yeah, I mean, the history of swearing is such a hot topic in linguistics, but also in medicine. So there have been a lot of studies showing that cortisol levels are lowered, serotonin levels are raised through having a good swear. And some of you may have seen the famous experiment. I think I'm trying to remember. Stephen Fry did this as well with Brian Blessed. There was an experiment whereby Brian had to put his hand in a vat of ice cold water. I mean, seriously cold water. And in one of them, he was shouting, "Bus, bus, bus," and in the other, he was shouting another word beginning with B, and actually worse, very, very loudly.
Yes.
And he was able to keep his hand in the ice cold water for twice as long when he was swearing. Which shows you, you know, exactly what effect it has. And I think, again, you know, be careful. There was a lot of, quite a few headlines in the press quite recently saying we're swearing more and our language is getting worse, and parents are becoming increasingly worried about it. You know, there's a lot you could say about that time and place and that kind of thing, but etymologically, swearing is fascinating. absolutely fascinating.
And it's fascinating if you use a fake swear word, it just doesn't work. You don't get that reduction in stress at all.
No, you don't. And also,
No.
what's quite interesting is words that have packed a punch for 5 centuries or more still do it. So we might think swearing is prolific, doesn't mean anything anymore. But actually, I work on a comedy show, as you know, and I can see the impact on swearing on the audience. It's an immediate trigger that they laugh because it's still slightly rebellious, strangely. So, yeah, it's very interesting. And also the new swear words that we're inventing now are simply mashups of the existing ones. But if you go back to, we tend to talk about swear words as those good old Anglo-Saxon words. In fact, most of them came about in the Middle Ages. But when they first came out, they were not taboo. They were slightly improper, but you would be surprised by what you might hear. I can't repeat any of them here, but yeah, they're quite surprising. And yeah, there's so much I could say, but I'm not quite sure how much I'm allowed to.
I think I think that was great. Well, thanks very much, Susie. I think we're going to open up to for some questions, but just for in the little intermediate, thank you very much.
Gosh, I'm so cool.
I don't know if anyone's got any questions. I would think so. We've got one at the front here.
A couple.
A couple.
In French and German, do they have the same approach to adjectives?
I think there's a microphone coming.
Do they have the same approach to adjectives that we have, i.e. you naturally get them lined up in the right order?
It's a really good question. I think I would say in French, yes. In German, I mean, famously everyone thinks German is even more regimented than English, but in German there's more of a kind of versatility, I think, despite the fact that, you have sort of strict rules in terms of where verbs, etc. go. I think Mark Twain famously said you can spot a German will dive into the Atlantic at the beginning of his sentence and end up on the other side with his verb in his mouth, which is pretty much describes how you construct a German sentence. But I think there is actually more freedom within German. It's a bit like Lego, isn't it? I think that's why we love German, because you just pile noun upon noun upon noun. But it's a really good question, and what I would love to know, despite the fact that I studied French and German at uni, I'm not a native speaker, so I don't know whether there are the same innate, instinctive rules that they follow. I suspect there are in every language, and we're just not aware of them.
And my second question is, at what stage does an abbreviation jump into mainstream language? Is it the number of cliques who might be using that abbreviation? So for an example, we have this debate, EV.
Yes.
It is common in the auto, the financial industry.
Yes.
And most people now know what it is.
Yes,
but the
I
other
didn't
side
know
of the
5 years
coin
ago,
of that
remember.
is ICE, which most people don't know what that is.
No, what is ICE? And why don't we call
internal
it ICE?
combustion engine.
Okay, so it's not called ICE.
Just ICE. at the moment.
ICE. Okay. I didn't know that one at all. EV, I remember puzzling over, seeing it in a manual. It took me ages to work out it's an electric vehicle. But it's a good question. It's all about usage. And of course, abbreviations also kind of covers contractions like van for caravan or burger for hamburger, etc., etc. I was writing about that yesterday, actually, for a kids' magazine, because this is going completely off the point, but we've lost the fact that it came from Hamburg. It was a Hamburg steak, because we thought it was made of ham. We'd cut off the ham and just call it a burger. But going back to your sort of abbreviations that don't really slip very beautifully off the tongue, it will be all about usage. But it's all about tribal language as well. So in every, remember going out with paramedics, the string of abbreviations that came out of their mouth, it meant absolutely nothing to me, but everything to them. So I would say it's quite demarcated in terms of who's using them and within that particular field. And if there is a use for them outside, then they will slip into the mainstream, but it's not guaranteed. Yeah, and as you have appreciated, it's so random as well. Why one thing and not another? Yeah, I've probably not answered that particularly well. But.
Got a question over here.
What advice would you have for English teachers today? When we were at school, infelicities in the use of language were not just bad, but a catastrophe.
Yeah.
Now there seems to be some sense that there's allowed to be a lassitude about use of English. What advice would you give to English teachers?
It's a really tough one. I think I've noticed this with my kids, that actually they are definitely more creative when they're not worrying about grammatical formalities, I would say. And it definitely flows better, but equally it's harder to read for me because I trip up over all their, over long sentences or the lack of commas or whatever. So I think the main thing to focus on, I would say, is not antiquated Latin rules that govern things like split infinitives or don't begin a sentence with a conjunction and that sort of thing, which truly are based on Latin grammars from the 19th century that were just thought to be fashionable at the time. They're not rooted in, as I said, there's no linguistic government saying what we have to do over English. But think about your audience. It's all about the audience. So you can be as articulate as you like in your head, get it down on paper, and then make it easy for your audience to read. So if there are misspellings in there, it does actually matter because it will trip up the reader and you will lose the impact of your communication. So I think if the focus is on getting the message across as beautifully, as succinctly, pithily, whatever the sort of objective is, as possible, then you can't go too far wrong. But I appreciate totally that it's a minefield that you are trying to navigate. And that actually reminds me of another thing that really gets people worked up is what we like to call eggcorns in lexicography, and you probably might have heard about eggcorns, but these are mishearings or slips of the ear where someone overheard a lady in the US, it's two linguists, talk about the beautiful acorns that had fallen from her oak tree, and they realised she was talking about acorns. But there are things like minefield is what made me think of it. I've been described as a minefield of information. But there are things happening very, very definitely. So we are trending towards things more than we are tending towards them. We are obviously the one that gets on people's nerves is pacifically rather than specifically, or nuclear instead of nuclear, and so on and so on. So that is another way in which language is evolving. And as a teacher, you have to decide what is the point where I actually correct this? What is standard? And it's frustrating, I know, that dictionary makers will say, we are describing language, we are not prescribing it. We are giving you the standard, but there is evolution here. So my parents argue the entire time over sliver and slither. And my father would say, I'll just have a sliver of cake. And my stepmother would say, it's a slither. And technically speaking, she's wrong, but you will find both in the dictionary now, just as you will find, much to people's chagrin, literally meaning anything but in the dictionary now. Literally will be defined in the dictionary as either literally or metaphorically.
Figuratively.
Yes,
yeah.
it's annoying, I know.
Joanne?
What are your, you were saying that you were dismayed at the imminent extinction of the semicolon.
Yes.
What other usages or grammar or punctuation or even, I don't want to talk about words, but the usages fall in the same category?
Well, I guess with punctuation, I can see that the colon too might sort of ebb. It's kind. I think this is on a slow burn, I think. I don't think it's going to happen overnight. But there are things with pronunciation, I mentioned specifically, there are things that used to really irk me, but I've decided to be fascinated by instead because it makes for a much easier life. So when I talk to audiences often, I will ask how people pronounce the adjective meaning full of mischief. And depending on the age of the audience and also sometimes where I am, mischievous or mischievous will, and you can definitely see that mischievous is making headway. My daughter says mischievous, and just about the one word that I pick her up on is I try not to be too much of a pedant. But obviously it's mischievous, but what people are doing is they are rhyming it. They're logically following the pattern of devious. And police officers said to me, my colleagues are talking about grievous bodily harm, so they're doing the same thing. And you can hear that in so many words now that we're putting an I in, where the spelling is actually very, very different. But spelling and pronunciation divorced a very long time ago. So I think mischievous is going to win in about 10 or 20 years, I think, yeah. But that's, that again, that's just, and whether we'll put the I in, I'm not sure, I suspect not. So that one, yes, used to really get on my nerves.
So I think we better start practicing now. Another question.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
My father was an Arabist and actually an Arab scholar, and he used to learn 15 new words a day.
Wow.
When we were posted to Saudi Arabia. And I was just wondering, is Arabic, what's the language that has the most words? I mean, is Arabic richer than English in terms of words?
I don't know Arabic very well at all. I could talk about sort of Arabic words in English, of which there aren't actually as many as there should be. But I often get asked, which is the richest language in the world and which has most words. I mean, English, the answer is quite an annoying one because it depends how you define a word. So you've got run, runs, running, ran. Are those all different words, or are they put, so it's quite difficult to quantify. But I love a quote by, there was a German playwright, Goethe, who said that French was like a country park. English was like a garden, a beautiful, beautiful garden. But German was like a thick, dark forest that you could get totally lost in. And I always remember that because German was my first love. I loved German before I loved English, quite a long time before I loved English. And for me, despite the fact I'm talking about the beauties of the English language, which are absolutely undeniable, German for me has the edge when it comes to the richest language. And I would say the same for pronunciation, which gets such a bad rap. People hate German. They think it sounds guttural and hard, and we're used to, inevitably, given our history, we're used to representations of that. But actually, I think it's the most lyrical language in the world that I've encountered. I don't know, obviously, every language, but yeah. But I'd love to learn Arabic. There's so many languages I would love to learn.
Arabic.
Is one a gentleman?
Yeah, I think we're very nearly out of time. I've got
okay.
time for one more, and I think I'm going to ask it. I'm really sorry.
Oh.
Yeah. What's the next book?
I don't think I'm allowed to say.
Oh, no.
There is.
Well, we can open it up then.
Yes, there is one. It will come out next year, but there is a little small hardback version of that coming out this autumn, which I will proofread to the nth degree, I have to say. Remind me I said that, because something will slip out. But yes, I will be able to announce it for too long, but my editor will kill me if I say. It's not. It's just nice. It's a nice book.
Well,
I really enjoyed
that does open up one more question.
That gentleman over there.
Cruelly cut off.
A question from myself about myself.
Oh yes, I think I knew where you were going with that one. It's annoying. Yes, this is an example of hypercorrecting. So this is an example where we think, are you coming with John and me? Sounds a bit too slangy. So we will say, are you coming with John and I? Where actually, grammatically speaking, me is a direct object, and so it should be me, not I. But we are often slipping in myself, the reflexive, because it sounds more elegant, where strictly speaking it's not necessary. And definitely that's something on the move that I've noticed as well. It together with super in front of everything, that's on Nick Hewer's top bugbear list. Right. He absolutely hates it. But yeah, it is annoying, and it's one of many annoyances in English. But I honestly do, I suppose as a kind of ending thing, I would just say the golden age of English has always existed in the past. We've never embraced the present and thought this is a good moment for our language, and we should never be too fearful for it, because English is so robust, it's so versatile, it's so exciting. Become a lexicographer just to kind of, to discover that I honestly think its future is in a good place. We just need to make sure that we keep reading and keep getting new vocabulary into our heads, because there's so much out there to gain.
Well, thanks so much from me.
Thank you very much.